Bonjour, Martin Martineau, analyste financier à la Société québécoise des infrastructures.
Bonjour, Véronique Paris, vice-présidente Supply Chain chez Danone Canada.
Bonjour, ici Slava Miteva, vice-présidente ressources humaines chez Danone Canada.
Danone has been around for almost 100 years. In that time, they've been able to increase the quality of life for millions of people around the world. Now, an international company looking to grow and to prosper in their current situation and beyond, they're looking at different growth strategies in order to maintain that prosperity into the future. We have come here today to propose a type of growth strategy that we believe the Danone Group can be profitable from. Here are my colleagues. This is Jean-Louis, Antoine, and myself, Lorenzo, and we're here to shed some light on that future growth strategy for the Danone Group. I will now pass on the floor to my colleague Antoine to walk you through the analysis.
Thank you, Lorenzo. So first off, we're going to start with the mandate. Our mandate today was to analyze two different options in terms of how to grow. So the first option was A, second option was B. Now we wanted to understand which of these two was the most attractive and the most profitable for that. Now going to the recommendation, following our thorough analysis, we've seen that the option B was the option which we thought on a short and medium term basis was the best one, although we've also realized that there were bigger problems that we needed to address before we can actually go for that specific option. Okay, now let's take a step back and try to understand what are the growth drivers of Danone in terms of international expansion. First one, when we look at Africa and when we look at a continent such as Africa, we understand that the population is growing tremendously. So as they've said, the population in Africa should reach what China is today by 2020. This is a tremendous opportunity in terms of people who are going to work and have disposable income and money to spend on products. Also, what you have to understand is that Danone has 4 different segments in terms of where their revenues are coming from. So water, fresh dairy, infant food, and medical food. And this is going to be very important, and we need to keep that in mind. Also, Africa is known, 15 of the cities in Africa are known to be the fastest growing cities. So it really ties back to what I was saying in terms of more money coming to the pockets of working people, and so this is an opportunity for us. And also another factor is that 53% of the sales of Danone are actually coming from the emerging markets. So this is a key factor that we have to understand, although it can be a two-edged sword because sometimes emerging markets can be more shaky than developed countries. Now looking at the Kenyan opportunity. Kenya is a country with 44 million people. The factor which is really, really important to understand is that there's a 50% infant there's mortality. So by the time people are reached 5 years old, there's 50% of them which will not go past this. So this is a tremendous problem that we do not have here. And this is something that we're going to address with Danone. Also, Kenya has been known to be breeding ground for athletes. So this is important to keep that in mind, because as more and more athletes come from there, well, they want to be more health conscious and they want to eat well. And we think that Danone has a strategic fit in that manner. And lastly, the life expectancy of people in Kenya is 62 years old. If we go back to more developed countries, for women, it's roughly 82 years old, and for men, it's about 80 years old. So there's a lot of room for improvement in the future. Now, what we have to understand, so the key conclusion for that is Danone's product can be integrated and accepted by the Kenyan market and its current lifestyle going forward. Now what we have to understand, and as I was saying, there is a bigger problem to address right now. As we've seen from 2012 to 2014, the operating margin and net profit margin of Danone have been drastically decreasing. In terms of operating margin, we've seen a decrease of roughly 11% over the span of that 2 years. And in terms of net margin, we've seen a decrease of roughly 30%. So this is humongous. And also we've seen, obviously, following that, we've seen a decrease in earnings per share, as I was mentioning. And the reasons that there are three main reasons that we see that are impacting this. The first one, in terms of operation costs. Well, we see that raw material is really a problem in Africa. Why? Well, most of the farms are actually in developed countries, and sometimes bringing perishable food to another country could be a hassle. Also, we've seen inflation costs, which means that the inflation has risen more than the actual price that we could price our product. And also, as we know, in the past few years, currencies have been very volatile, and Danone, as being a European-based company, while as the currency rise and drop, it can create huge problems, which we're going to address later in the mitigation. And so what we can conclude from that is the internal problems for Danone need to be addressed, and they are much more important than what option A or option B could bring in actual revenue, incremental revenue in the future. Now I will pass on the floor to Jean-Louis, who's going to address the financials.
Okay, thank you, Antoine. So now that Antoine has actually gone over the analysis and the feasibility of the project on a macro level, I'm going to dig in on the financials and take a look into the granular level of both profitability of Project A and Project B. So the first thing that we're going to do right now is we're going to run through the operating inputs and the assumptions that we've actually used in order to calculate our analysis for the net present value of both projects. So the first thing that we want to keep in mind is that option A, which is the greenfield, is that we're actually going to be building a plant within Africa in Kenya. Whereas in option B, we're going to use a neighboring country that we've already have operations in and leverage this in order to supply the African markets right now with the products that they currently need. So Antoine has alluded to the fact that right now there's a lot of breeding ground for athletes and the fact that there's a high infant mortality rate. Well, what does that mean for Danone? That means that there's a strategy right here that they can implement in terms of providing medical nutrition as well as early stage nutrition products for these Kenyan populations. And the fact that we can price these at an attractive rate is very attractive for Danone, and this is the reason why we want to go into the Kenyan markets right now. So the first thing that we want to take into look is the financing of the project. Well, option A is actually going to cost roughly $130 million, whereas option B is going to cost $60 million in capital expenditures. So how are we going to finance this project? Well, the fact is that Danone has strong free cash flow currently on hand, as well as a high net income. So if we take this percentage, 130 million or the 60 million, and we divide this by either the net income or the free cash flow, we can see that it's not substantial and it's not very material on Danone right now. So we believe that, given its current profitability, Danone can actually finance this project through the free cash flow, and there will not be a need to take on debt in order to finance this current project. The other assumptions that we've taken into account are that option B currently does not have industrial costs because we're not building a plant in Kenya, so there's zero industrial costs. Secondly, the tax rate is zero, and we're also assuming that the inflation rate will be zero. So we can see right here is that the material costs for Danone are actually higher in option B, and this is going to increase the cost of goods sold and decrease the overall profitability and margins for these projects. So moving forward, if we can go back to the revenue build-up for option A, we can see that the population in Kenya is currently at 44 million. We're expecting this population to grow at an annual growth rate of 5%. Following that, we're expecting the population target of A to actually be, we're expecting the population target right now for Danone to hold a current 10% market share. Now this market share is expected to grow at 5% annually. So from years 1 to 5, which is the length of the project, it's going to increase from 10 all the way to 35% at the end of year 5 and remain stagnant from here on out. In terms of population B, in terms of option B, we can see that the market share that they want to hold right now is 10%, but rather than a 5% increase, they're actually going to be increasing the market share by 3% year over year. So this gives a market share of 25% at the end of year 5 and here on out remaining for the life of the project. Now what we can see is that per customer in Kenya, they're going to consume 3 kilograms of a certain product. So in order to get the total production consumed by the Kenyan customer, we multiply the 3 times our market share of the current population in Kenya right now. And that's going to derive in 2016 22% 22.87 million kilograms, and 19.92 kilograms for option B. Now we can see that in option A, the difference is the fact that we can actually substantially generate more production and more sales from this. Therefore, our revenues will be much higher for option A. Now we can also see our retailer margin. So we're going to sell this at $5 per kilogram. Now the retailer margin right now is 35%. So if we do the calculations, we're selling the actual price of our product to our retailers for $3.25. However, in option B, we have to consider that there's a 10% additional fee added onto this cost because right now we're not selling directly and we're not actually going to be exporting this product. So we can see that the price that we're going to sell the products for option B are 10% lower than they are for option A. So moving forward, I just want to show you some of the margins for both projects that we're actually going to see. So we can see that option A is way more profitable than option B. Now this is the reason, as I alluded to before, for option A, the costs of goods sold are much lower. However, the fact is that their EBITDA and EBIT margins are higher even though they have industrial costs. So the fact is that also here in option A, we have a lot more employees because we're actually going to be building our own plant. So in option A, we have 100 employees in year one, so that's in 2016. It's increasing to 200 employees in 2017, and in 2008, we're going to have 300 employees working for our factory, and from 2018 to 2020, we're going to have 300 employees as well. However, for option B, our employees are going to be much less, and our operational costs are going to be much less because the fact that we have roughly 250 less employees. So the fact is that we have 16 employees in year one, 16 employees in year two, and then 18 employees incremental in year three for a total of 50 employees by year three and moving forward for the project. Now let's take a look at the NPV analysis and see whether or not this project is actually profitable. So we can see here that given the initial capital outlay of $130 million in year one, we actually have a positive NPV for option A of $34.5 million. Looking at the payback period, which is when the NPV is equal to 0, how long will it take to repay the costs of this project? We can see that both projects are roughly the same at around 4.2 years. What the problem is here is that in option B, although there's a less profitability, our initial capital outlay is much less, so the NPV compares itself because we have a 21.89% million NPV over here. So what we can see from this is that although option A right now seems more profitable, we have to look at more than just the financials and assess the potential risks into investing into option A and moving into a Kenyan plant rather than actually just using our current operationals in a neighboring country and then leveraging that and then selling it to Kenyan consumers. What we can see here is that, as Antoine alluded to, right now Danone faces a bigger problem than how to grow. So currently its operations have actually declined, and you can see from the graph on top that the net income margins have decreased from 8.56 to 5.93 from 2012 to 2014. Your EPS has actually decreased as well from 2.78 to 1.88, so that's a large percentage of a decrease, and the shareholders aren't going to be too happy with the result of this. So that's why we've proposed that before we actually implement our strategies for option A and option B, we must address these operational issues at hand. We can see here that you asked us how much of this current project is going to add to our bottom line and to the gross profit of Danone Group as a whole. Well, we can see that in option A and in option B, it's not very material in terms of the additional and incremental revenue or the profitability that it's going to add to the net profit or to the gross margin. So we can see that option A is actually only going to increase our net income by 84 basis points, whereas in option B, we're only going to increase our net income by 36 basis points. So we can see that given the fact that we can actually address our current operational issues, and if we were to remain at our current margins at 8.56 in 2012 for 2014, given the revenue growth that we've sustained over the last 3 years, we can increase our revenues by almost $600 million. So this $600 million is the difference of the 2% of margins that we can generate. So if we were to actually fix our current operational issues at hand, we can actually generate substantially more revenue, and this will generate directly into the bottom line. So we can see from the $557 million that this is obviously the option that we have to address before investing into options A or option B. So I'm now going to pass the floor to Lorenzo to talk about the implementation and the alternatives for this project.
Thank you, Jean-Louis. So we know that we're going to be approaching option B, and we know that we have a couple of things to optimize before we enter into option B. And that being said, we are going to look at some alternatives. I just want to reiterate the fact that option B is to expand operations and export into Kenya without setting up this plant to produce the products there. Option A, being more expensive, is setting up all the facilities there and then allowing growth internally throughout the country. Now, if we look at option A, yes, it seems to be more profitable, but why are we not taking option A? For one, there's geopolitical instability. In Africa, there are many things to be considered. It's not quite like Canada. You've stipulated to us that in Canada, the stability of the country, politically, economically, and also with regulation, is such that it allows for you to manufacture your products safely. And that being said, you use a lot of milk products in your current operations, and they need to be pasteurized with no contamination. In order to maintain this type of security and safety, option A, developing these plants in that country using their cows as production for dairy products, is a risk, and you will need to optimize even the production of the dairy products from the suppliers before you can set up your own shop. The next one would be the currency risk. Now, currency risk, because a lot of your revenues come from international, a lot of the things that what we're talking about in currency risk actually apply to both option A and B, but we will show how to mitigate that option in option B later on in the risks and mitigations. All it's simply saying is, in order to avoid the currency risk of fluctuating foreign exchange rates, we do believe that this is one of the reasons that you are experiencing current increasing costs, and this is something I'm going to cover again in the implementation. Looking at another option, you came to us with two options, both option A and B, which are both very plausible expansion options. But there's another way to penetrate into the Kenyan market, and that's by purchasing an existing dairy company. Ensuring operations are strategic in line with that of Danone is important. However, purchasing a company and purchasing another company like this does require less capital heavy, yes, upfront, but not throughout, as we don't have to set up the plant, and it bears slightly less risk as the current operations are already in motion. Now, one thing that we didn't, or the reason we didn't go with this other option is because as Danone, you are reliant on your product safety and quality standards. In order to optimize the business, the cost might actually outweigh the future profitability, and based on no options presented, we just weren't able to go into further depth of another alternative in terms of company to purchase. So with both of those options, both viable, they are difficult to mitigate the risks associated with going into those two directions. If we go on to the next slide, this is just a reiteration that we are going to go into option B. However, we first need to strengthen current margins to not allow for an amplified decrease in margins. Going to the next slide, we'll look at the implementation. So between the next 3 to 6 months, you're looking at assessing your current operations, setting up financial controls, and optimizing them, and begin operation improvements. Now, you need to do this internally to increase the efficiency of your current operations to bring those margins back up. Within 1 year, you need to start hedging your currencies, all on an international scale as well as those in Africa, and through swaps of currencies, and you need to begin the expansion into Kenya in terms of the distribution. 2 years down the line and plus, you're looking at assess the expansion of the profitability expansion and potentially enter into option A if it's a market that seems to be doing quite well. So we do know that margin improvement is crucial, and that the expansion into Kenya will drive sales, again in line with the margin improvement. If we could take a look at some quick risks and mitigations, some of the risks that we associate to the option B would be, again, geopolitical expropriation, so things like war and instability, the healthcare issues in the country, along with the sanitation or the level of cleanliness in terms of the facilities, and demand not being met as well as the currency. Now, we know that we can mitigate, the results of these could be financial instability, we increase our costs and further decrease our margins, as well as hindering the shareholder value, which is ultimately something we want to protect. In order to mitigate these things, we do believe that Danone Group should start partnering with the government and create social initiatives to increase the quality of life for the Kenyans, as well as promote their product at the same time. Again, we do believe that hedging the currency will allow for a mitigation of that risk in the African country. So all risks can be mitigated with option B and the margin expansion. All in all, we do believe that the Danone Group can profit from this expansion. However, fixing the leaks on the current margins will allow for an amplified, greater growth for Danone Group. Thank you very much, and we open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Antoine, Lorenzo, and Jean-Louis. Very good presentation. You say A and B are too. I guess I understand A and B are too close to call. B safer. Go with B. If you consider what happens after 2020, do you think that will change your result?
Well, one of the things that, by us going into and expanding first with option B, would allow us to test the market, to test the waters of the market, to see how well our product is attracted. Once we realize that there is substantial market share that we can capture in the Kenyan environment and gain the sales that we need necessary, we can then set up a plant and enter into option A, a more sustainable option within the 3+ years into the future, and this would ensure that long-term growth.
You're talking about the challenge that we're facing with, the profitability in Danone, because Danone was extremely Europe-centric in the past. Isn't it the right strategy to be the first in emerging market to renew with profitability instead of backing up a little bit?
Well, we're not telling you guys to actually back off. So right now what we're saying is that we should assess our current operations and improve our profitability on our current operations. Given the fact that we already have a foothold within Alma, that's quite strong, we believe that after these operations have been addressed, we can actually enter the market. So within 1 year, we can actually gain a foothold, and we still have a competitive advantage if we implement this project within 1 year.
Just to add to that, increasing the margins and being able to strengthen them will allow for us to amplify the returns on the project and not necessarily hinder them further. Seeing as market margins are decreasing, if we do expand into this territory without protecting the margins, then we can see further shrinkage, and that could lead to detrimental effects on the company.
And what do you see as a risk or potential risk to have a more complex supply chain with an ultra-fresh product?
So right now, given the fact that if we're proposing option B, and right now we already have operations in a neighboring country of Kenya, we can leverage our current supply chain over there, and the fact that we can just we can ship these products to Kenya, we don't see a very big issue with that. Whereas if we actually have to implement operations right into Kenya, we have to set up a whole new supply chain from that endpoint, and we can see potential challenges in that regard.
Can you explain to me how you came up with the numbers on the number of line of production that you need? You said in both options that you need 15 lines, I guess. Can you just explain to me how you came up with that number?
Well, in order to increase the availability to produce and supply these products to Kenya, whether you're creating a facility there or you're going to be shipping these products, either way, you're going to need to increase your capacity of production. So with that, whether you're adding these lines to your neighboring countries' production facilities or to the new production facility, that being option A, then you would have to spend the money regardless in order to increase that capacity to feed the demand.
Even with different market penetration with the option A or option B, because the market shares are not the same in both options.
Sorry, can you repeat your question, please?
Both options have market share that are not aligned. One is 35% in option A at the end of fifth year, and it's 25 in the case of option B. So the sales won't be the same in both options. So how you come up with the same infrastructures to produce?
Well, also some of these products will be gaining market share over the years. Yes, they're not the same, but if we're able to amplify with the partnerships with the government and the social initiatives, we could potentially get that market share to roughly the same level. This again, we'd only be able to, this is part of the testing of the waters, is getting those partnerships and those social initiatives so we can generate more, it's almost like advertising through a means of helping the communities. And so we'll be able to drive more market share with the option B strategy than just solely getting into the country, advertising its local produce. And then, so we'll be able to use that full capacity increase and potentially be able to capture the whole market. And not necessarily any extra, but we can also decrease the amount we produce. It's just to increase the capacity of production.
Merci. La période de questions est terminée.